Well, just don't move your lips, Ian, or else you really have us confused.
What's that? Sorry, I was on mute.
Just
I
don't
didn't hear
move
that.
your lips, Ian, because that'll really confuse us.
Okay, I'll just. Okay, apologies to our members of the public who are waiting for that. So we will call the meeting to order. And first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda and addition of any late items. Any thoughts from anybody on the agenda?
No, looks good.
Okay.
Okay, so motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, second item, adoption of the minutes from the March 18th, 2021 regular board meeting.
So moved.
So everybody had a look and read through them.
Yeah.
Any changes or? Okay, so moved. Second for approval of adoption of the minutes.
Second.
I'll second it.
Second.
All in favor of adoption of the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Next item up on the list will be ratification of motions from the April 1st Committee of the Whole meeting. If you scroll down in your package or flip through your package, mine's not printed, we will see the minutes from that COW meeting, and there are items in there that are grade that require us to ratify the motion. So item number 5 in those minutes was that the motion was a strategic priority special work items bylaw number 264, development and subdivision regulation and standards bylaw 2016, that the Comox Valley Regional District be requested to enact after conversion an amended version of bylaw 264 as per the list of amendments recommended previously by the UBID solicitor. That motion was tabled, that we would not pursue that further. And Gary, what action do you believe we need to take now, given that it was tabled?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. My suggestion, as you know, CVRD staff, Mr. Warren and staff from engineering and planning did listen in at that meeting and heard the discussion, heard the concerns. And I think that they respect those concerns and think that they're legit.
Are you asking for me?
My suggestion would be that firstly, them having heard those concerns, that we have a conversion working or steering committee meeting next week, I believe it is. I think that it would be prudent to raise this. The members of the trustees are representatives on that group to raise this issue at that steering committee meeting and hear any response from the CVRD. But at this point in time, I think that just having had this discussion, the CVRD hearing it and being part of it to a certain extent, they know where we're coming from. I think this should be just referred back to staff and we'll have some further discussions with CRD planning in regards to, okay, you've heard a motion which was tabled. I think they probably have a sense of, you know, your desired objective. Let's talk about how we would get there. So my suggestion, raise it next week. And then at the staff level, we would pursue some further discussions and ask CVRD to come back with a response to that tabled motion.
Okay.
Can you remind us, please, Chair, can you remind us what tabled actually means in a parliamentary?
Tabled means that it's set aside for now, that it won't be acted on. It won't be voted on at the time.
Yeah,
At this time?
Yeah.
Okay, but it's not dead. There's some kind of a tabling where it's becomes dead.
yeah, technically, I mean, when you table something, if you don't deal with it at the same meeting, it's technically, I guess, dead. Whereas if you use the word postpone, it's postponed to a future specified meeting that you might want to specify. So my suggestion on this one is, I think, leave the motion the way it is. Perhaps just ask that clarification be given that the motion has been postponed for future consideration after a response from the CVRD.
Thank you. I wanted to be sure not to fall into that tabled, but whoops, it's gone place. Is this the appropriate point to bring up? And by the way, it was very helpful having the CVRD staff there explaining what it was that we were kind of, what that new subdivision bylaw was to accomplish, and the reference to the MMCD document, the Municipal Big Bible. Would it be prudent, this is a question for the chair and for administration, would it be perhaps prudent for us to formalize a motion stating that we wish to have future developments follow the guidelines as laid out in the MMCD?
So that would mean that we're postponing this motion and having a different motion?
Yeah,
Well,
or
I think
whatever.
what
I'm just
we're
trying to,
talking, when we went through this at the Cal meeting, it was really about, let's get CVRD involved before we do anything more, right?
right,
And that CVRD does already have in their bylaws that they will follow MMCD, right? And that we had postponed this motion awaiting that, or we were talking about tabling it, now recommending we change that to postponing it. What if we did that and let that come back with further information before
Okay.
we revive the debate?
okay.
Does that,
Yeah.
are you okay with that?
I am okay with that. It's because I thought that was so helpful, that MMCD reference.
Well, Mr. Chair, I think it's a legitimate point, and I think you can raise this issue at the Conversion Steering Committee meeting next week. And my only suggestion on this motion is let it stand, but perhaps at this point in time, you pass a motion or you propose a motion that, just to clarify that this motion from the Committee of the Whole has been postponed as opposed to tabled. So then we can bring it back after we've had the Conversion Steering Committee and you've articulated some of your concerns and give them the opportunity to respond.
So do we need to vote, Gary, as a group to say
Yeah,
the board votes to postpone this motion?
Yeah, for the record, just
Yeah.
a motion that it's to clarify that this motion has been postponed.
Okay. So
So
all in
moved.
favor of postponing rather than tabling the motion as read?
Aye.
Aye. Eve,
No,
you're not in favor?
no,
So I feel like I made a mistake here. I feel like I didn't ask for discussion. I
That's
just went
okay.
straight to vote. So
it's all right.
with approval of the other trustees, I'd love to be able to ask if there is discussion that needs to be made, because it sounds like I didn't offer the opinions or people the ability to express an opinion.
I can, well, since you're all agreed, I guess I'm the one that needs to express my opinion as to why I'm voting against that postponement. I think we should proceed with the motion, because the CVRD only uses the MMCD as a guideline. They don't have it in their bylaws. It's a guideline. So that means, you know, I think, well, somebody sent me an email from Zoe that with their policy, they use it as a guideline. Every situation's different, so sometimes you can't hold them to it or whatever. So I don't agree. I think we should pursue the motion, and that's why I voted against your motion.
So any other discussion from Ted or Susanna with respect to the proposal to postpone this motion?
No, I understand, though. I thank you, Eve, for clarifying where you're coming from. That will be one of the questions I'll ask when we're at the CVRD meeting, which is what kind of exceptions are we, referencing to the email that you referred to. I'll get further clarity on.
Yeah. I mean, the whole idea is that you guys have been on this committee for like how long? And this has not come up or had an answer yet. It seems to me that we're never going to get what I think we should have. And I would rather have them definitively know what we want or what I want and have them say no, rather than this circle of wasting time and running around and blah. That's really my official opinion.
Ed, any comments?
No, I have no comments.
Okay. All right. So any other discussion? I'm fine as well. So shall we proceed? All in favor of postponing this motion? Aye.
Aye.
All against?
Aye.
Okay. Motion is postponed. Okay, next motion is listed on item number 6. The motion is that in terms of next steps to be taken with respect, sorry, I should read the title. The UBID Board 2021 Strategic Priorities / Special Work Items proposed separate office, washroom, staff room facility at UBID Water Treatment Plant. That in terms of next steps to be taken on proceeding with this particular file, staff be requested to pursue the portable / modular option for a separate office / washroom / staff room facility at the water treatment plant. So that is the motion. Can I have a seconder, please?
Second.
Okay, discussion. Anybody have any comments? Just please speak or raise your hand so I can. Okay, no discussion? All in favor of this motion, say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Item number 7, the motion, UBID Board 2021 Strategic Priorities / Special Work Items / proposed separate office / washroom / staff room facility at UBID Water Treatment Plant, that the interim administrator be directed to prepare a report summarizing the past events and activities which led to the underfunding of the water treatment plant as indicated in the materials contained in the agenda package provided by the interim administrator and the auditor. The motion was amended to replace the words "that the interim administrator be directed to" with the words "that a select committee be formed to." So that's the motion. Second, please.
Second.
Okay, discussion. So this is the item where we discussed this a little bit in the in-camera session, but I wanted for the public as well, say that our administrator has been doing some additional work and research with respect to information that may be required to pursue and really understand this issue a little bit more. And I think it would be prudent that we have Gary speak to us about that, present his findings and some recommendations to us as to how best to proceed with this. So Gary, if I could turn it over to you, that would be great.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. In the intervening period of time since this committee of the whole motion was passed, I have done some some degree of research into the past minutes and records from 2018, 19, and 20 in particular related to this particular matter. I have not been, of course, working remotely with COVID. I have not been through records outside of the 18, 19, and 20 minute books, which in some cases do contain materials which were presented at the various committee of the whole, board meetings, and camera meetings. Keep in mind that we're 2/3 of the way through conversion, and the documents, the vast majority of documents have now been taken to the CVRD. They're in secure storage at the Aquatic Center. And last Thursday, and it's in my report, something in the order of 75 to 80 boxes of documents. We did a preliminary sort. The CVRD did a preliminary sort. And there's about 20 documents, boxes of documents related to be reviewed. So one of the big challenges, of course, is that our documents now are, for all intents and purposes, most of them off-site. But having said that, I have reviewed what I think are, key documents that facilitate sort of connecting the dots on how this issue of the water treatment plant played out over a 3-year period. I've been through those documents, through the minutes of 18, 19, and 20. I have a reasonable degree of comfort that I think I understand the sort of the sequencing of events of what happened. I can say this on the basis of what I've reviewed, and I did spend some time on the weekend reviewing those materials. There are motions. Motions were passed and approved by the board to approve the 3 contracts. Remember, there were 3 principal contracts for the water treatment plant. The total amount of those 3 contracts was slightly in excess of $5 million. But there were motions that were adopted and presented to the board at various times to approve those 3 contracts. Legal advice was obtained by the district in regards to the awarding of the major contract, which was the $4.2 million contract for construction. Legal advice was obtained, and that legal advice was acted on. There was a motion passed to award a construction contract for $4.2 million. That's clear in the records. Most of, if not all of the decisions, certainly most of the decisions appear to me have related to the water treatment plant and the financial issues and borrowing and those types of things appear to have been made largely in camera. And I'm not in a position to say or know, I wasn't here, whether there was a rise and report process that went, subsequent to in camera, if things were risen and reported in an open meeting. Most, if not all of the decisions I've come across, the major ones with respect to the plant, were done in camera. The loan authorization bylaw similarly was presented to the board. This is the borrowing bylaw for the $4.2 million. It was presented to the board. There were the appropriate motions to give it readings and final passage, and the bylaw was adopted. Again, it was done in camera, and I'm not aware if there was ever a public riser report. So from the sense of the bylaw being given the necessary readings, being sent to the ministry, the inspector, it was registered with the inspector. The in-camera issue, I'm not a lawyer in regards to whether I could say that the bylaw is illegitimate or illegal. because it was presented in an in-camera meeting, I'm not in a position to provide advice on that. I frankly don't know. But I can tell you that the bylaw was prepared and given readings and adopted and sent to the ministry, but it was done in an in-camera forum. The funding strategy, that it's well documented. In March, I believe, of 2019, a fairly detailed report was presented to the board, which basically discussed a funding strategy. How are we going to pay for this $4.2 million construction contract? And there were recommendations presented in regards to, okay, we're going to borrow a certain amount, and we will take a certain amount out of reserves, and we will raise parcel charges a certain amount. So there was a fairly robust report that was presented to the board in regards to, okay, here's the bylaw. Now, if we go ahead and pass this bylaw and award the construction contract, how are we going to fund it? And there were decisions made to proceed with the loan authorization bylaw for $3.5 million, take $700,000 out of reserves, raise parcel charges. And there was even some discussion, or it appears from the report, at future potential funding sources for paying for the plant. Such things as property sales and Union Bay Estates and additional appropriations out of the Public Works Capital Reserve, all of this to pay off the debt. So there was some discussion about that. As I said, the bylaw was registered with the inspector. There was a strategy that was talked about in regards to the $4.2 million contract. And that was in March 2019. I didn't find any, and that's not to say it isn't there, but from the minutes and the documents that I looked at, primarily the minute and meeting books, the cows, the regular meetings, the in-cameras, there doesn't appear to have been any kind of further comprehensive discussions about a funding strategy. Okay, so the plant, the 4.2 million is only the construction cost. There are other contracts for site prep and other costs for engineering fees, subconsultants. There doesn't appear to have been after March 2019, further discussion in regards to, okay, we're further along in the project. Here's the funding envelope, which is increased. Here's previous decisions we've made. Now we need to rethink our funding strategy and maybe borrow more or take more out of reserves or whatever. I couldn't find, any evidence of that. I obviously have some questions about from what I've seen, the degree of completeness of the financial picture that was presented and information given to the board to assist them in making these decisions. Again, it was from what I see, the $4.2 million construction decision, there was quite a bit of discussion about funding it. But of course, the project, is over $5 million, right? There's other components to it. So as the project moved along, clearly bills were being paid, basically funded internally through accumulated reserves and surplus, and it's terminology, but accumulated reserves and surplus operations, however you want to describe it. I don't have any reason to believe that there were any illegal expenditures or anything like that. But again, it comes down to the degree of information that was presented to the board after 2019, March 2019, and the comprehensiveness of the information that was considered, I guess, last year. Once the plant was completed and most of the costs were known, I'm not sure, and there's not a lot of evidence that I could see that these issues of the reserve balances and the amount of working capital and the deficit were discussed in the context of how much are we going to raise the parcel taxes in 2021 to pay for this? And to my way of thinking, this is it's a pretty critical piece of information that you'd need to know in terms of how much are we going to raise parcel charges in 2021. So it's by no means, I guess, a criticism. It's just that I have a fairly good idea, I think. Those were the key documents that I went to look for. I'm not entirely sure we're going to find a whole. We've retrieved some plans and some consultants' reports and things like that. But the key issue here is kind of the funding strategy and how we're going to pay for it. So, I mean, my observations are my observations. I'm not a finance person. I've been around long enough to be able to read financial statements and stuff, but it's not my area of expertise. And again, if it was entirely up to me, the approach that I would be taking, and one that I recommend, is that basically you ask me to come back with a report. And I would propose that I outsource this. I've already talked to a qualified individual, more of that in a minute. Come back with a report, basically that would do three things. One, a report which kind of sets out the current financial picture with the water treatment plant. Now that all costs are in, now that we've borrowed a certain amount, we've raised parcel taxes a certain amount, talking about the deficit in terms of, working capital versus reserve balances. And by the way, that is in the financial statements. It will be in the financial statements that we just reviewed yesterday, Janice and I. The auditor has, he's identified this. He's suggested some approaches to deal with it, but it will be in the statements. So my suggested strategy would be that we come back with a report setting out, first of all, the current financial picture of the water treatment plant. Where do we sit right now? What about this deficit? How are we going to deal with it? But make it clear and transparent. And this would be a report that would be written to me that would go to a public meeting. Here's the current situation with the plant. It is what it is. Item number 2 for the report would be lessons learned. Okay, well, we didn't consider this. We should have perhaps. We should have taken this into account. There should have been further information provided in regards to this or that. Lessons learned and, what we should be doing in the future. And that's important, I think, for the CVRD, given conversion, so that they clearly understand the situation. And, we get into the lessons learned component and, moving forward, things we must do. And then the third part of the report, I would, and this is what I would be asking my finance, if I was running a municipality or something like this. Okay, for third part of the report, come back with options and strategies moving forward. Okay, from a financial perspective, how are we going to address this? And it's in the, Graham, in the financial statements that you're going to see next week. He's made an observation. Yes, there's I guess you call it a deficit, or but the water treatment plant has been completed, and there's a difference between the total cost and funding is a draw on the district's operations. Recommendation: additional funding should be obtained to better fund the water treatment plant. This could be in the form of applying additional reserves to the project, additional borrowing, or additional levies like parcel charges and things like that. So this report would examine in more detail and come up with options and recommendations, which undoubtedly, given the timing of conversion, would have to be considered by the CVRD. My suggested strategy is to allow me to outsource this. I have a contact, and this isn't, I have a contact in the field who I work with, who I used to work with in the city of Nanaimo, Brian Clemens. He's the ex-general manager. He was the director of finance for the city of Nanaimo. So very high up in the finance department, very familiar with these large capital construction projects. Let me outsource it to him. It's probably about 15 to 20 hours of work, $60 an hour. And I'd ask him he's got to talk to several key people to piece this together. I would provide him with materials, some of which are in camera, okay? But I'd provide him with the materials that I've managed to piece together to connect the dots. And I'd like him to talk to the auditor, Janice, and the chair at the time in 2019, when a lot of this stuff was being discussed, and any members of your committee, the chair of the select committee, for example, and probably Chair Monroe as well. That would be my suggested strategy. I don't think it necessarily has to take an awful long time. Undoubtedly, it won't be prepared before the AGM, which is, less than 2 weeks now, I guess 2 weeks. But clearly, this would be my recommended approach to this, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Gary, for that. I'm trying to keep this in the context of the motion that was made, because that's a section of the agenda that we're in, is to ratify motions. And so the motion was originally made to direct the administrator to prepare a report, and it was subsequently amended to say that we would form a committee to prepare a report. And if I'm paraphrasing what Gary has just told us, that it sounds like he would be recommending that we further amend the motion to say that the interim administrator engage a consultant to prepare a report. And if I read the interim administrator engage a consultant to prepare a report summarizing the past events and activities which led to the underfunding of the water treatment plant as indicated in the materials contained in the agenda package. That feels like that motion would be in line with Gary's recommendation. I just want to check back in with him to make sure that he feels that as well.
Yes, I think so, Mr. Chairman. And I guess the difference is that when the motion was first made that the interim administrator be directed to prepare a report, summarizing the past events and activities. And there was discussion about reviewing a vast array of documents and essentially almost pursuing it like a
Forensic.
say a forensic audit or something like this. That will be very challenging. Given the status of conversion at this time, and pulling all those documents together, the vast majority of which are off-site. And I'm pretty comfortable, I'm pretty confident that most of the information that is out there is in the materials that I have reviewed in regards to the minutes, the in-camera, the cows, the board. Yes, there may be some pieces that are missing. I'm not sure, but I think, to have a select committee, and I'm not necessarily talking, saying don't have a select committee, but for them to pursue and to ask for a vast array of documents, I think that's going to be fairly challenging given where we're at with conversion, the fact that we're working remotely and it's going to be hard to retrieve all these documents. I think I'm pretty confident we have enough right now to have a professional finance individual review what has happened, what has transpired, and come back with a report covering off the three principal components that I would suggest. With the report being written to me as the CAO, whether it's an outside individual or a director of finance working for me, that's how basically we would likely be handling it in a local government situation. So that's my suggestion.
Okay, so I think where we're at then is that the motion is now that the interim administrator engage a consultant to prepare a report summarizing the past events and activities which led to the underfunding of the UBID water treatment plant as indicated in the materials contained in the agenda package provided by the interim administrator and the auditor. So that's the amended motion. Can I have a seconder prior to discussion?
I'll second that.
Okay, so let's move to discussion. Who would like to start? Eva, I'd love to go to you first, seeing how you've been intimately involved in this more than us.
I've got a question, Gary. How is this guy going to get access to all the information if not through the staff providing it to him?
No, through myself. I literally have, because I was at the CVRD last week when they were doing the record sort, and I did manage to retrieve, because consider there was over 100 boxes up there, and I put them on alert that if you folks come across any, there was 5 or 6 staff there, if you come across any documents related to the water treatment plant, pull them out. And so they have retrieved some documents, but I also retrieved the 2018-19 minute book, which was up there. And Janice provided me with the 2020 minute book. So I have gone through those. They are here right now with me. And I have flagged key pieces of meeting information. And I've referred to, like there were 3 motions that were presented at different times. I have all of that documentation. I would provide that documentation to my resource, and on the basis of that, he would prepare his report. But it would be important that he have a discussion with the auditor and with the chair at the time, the current chair, and the chair of this select committee, so that he totally understands, and obviously any other individuals who may be significantly involved in previous discussions related to this.
So
I have a package of information here.
So you have the information and you provide, so why do we need to hire somebody if we've got committee people who are willing to do this work with information you're going to have to provide anyway?
Well, I think what we need is a professionally prepared report from an experienced finance director who comes from a local government environment, who knows his way around this stuff, comprising the 3 principal components that I've suggested. Even I don't feel that I have the expertise to get into, detailed issues about, okay, how do we, what are the strategies, what are the options to move forward on this? That requires an area of expertise that I'm not a professional in.
Well, that's outside the scope of what the original motion was made for, which was just to explain what happened. So that's additional work, which is great. I think, yeah, it has to be done.
Well,
but it's outside of this sort of scope, and I'm not against it. But what I'm saying is, I don't know that we need a select committee if we have this outsourced.
Yeah, and speaking,
it seems redundant. It seems unnecessary.
I could certainly probably prepare a report which covers off component number 1 in terms of, okay, explain some of the things I just talked about in terms of how this happened and how the decision-making evolved and maybe gaps in the information. I could probably do that first part, but in terms of lessons learned and moving forward with options and strategies, no, that's outside of my area of expertise.
Right, that's why there was a committee that was struck to get to that. Now, do we still want that? Because it seems like your suggestions are not focusing on explaining what happened.
If I
And
could
that's
jump.
what I thought that we were trying to get at.
If I could jump in for a second, the next motion that we had was with respect to appointing a chair to the committee, right? So I guess what I would suggest we do is work through this motion, which basically says there isn't a committee, right? Like this motion created the committee in the past. And that, we get down through it. If this motion were to pass, there is no committee because there's no motion formed that says form a committee.
Exactly.
And then, we could discuss whether we need a committee or whatever, chair to a committee that doesn't exist, so we would just table it. Right, but that's just from a procedural point of view where I think we're at.
Well, if we did do that, amend the motion to have the interim administrator hire a consultant to create a report to do what? Explain what happened, or Gary's 3 things, which I didn't hear in those 3 things.
Well, I also agree that may be a reasonable amendment to make to this motion, right? As to where we said, which led to the underfunding of the water treatment plant as indicated, right? We could specify Gary's 3 things, but I think that might be a little bit redundant and restrictive in the event that, perhaps something not in those 3 things that is very relevant comes up. Gary, I'd love your thoughts on that.
Well, I, from my perspective, I talked about the 3 components of a report. If it was just up to me, what I'd be asking, my finance director to do. The second part, the lessons learned, right? I mean, what gaps, what did we not pay attention to? What was not.
I don't like that, because I wasn't on the board that didn't pay attention to this. And I don't like that wording at all. I want to know what happened when the board that was making these decisions or not making these decisions, what happened? Why did they do it? That's what I thought we were looking at. Now, if we don't want to do that, we should make it clear and discuss that. Lessons learned. I don't need to learn lessons. If I was on the board when we were doing this thing, this would not have happened. That's how I look at it.
Could I say something?
Ted had his hand up.
Now, Mr. Chair, I understand where Eve is coming from, but at the same time, Vancouver Island Health basically stated and mandated that this water treatment plant had to go forward, or we could be receiving up to $30,000 a month in penalties. And Union Bay, I'm sure, didn't want to have $30,000 of landowners' money going every month to the Vancouver Island Health for penalties because this plant was not moving forward. That was the pressure that was being put on. And being it was mandated, we had no choice. And to be able to turn around and build more than just the plant at that time, the whole object was to build that plant, get that plant into operation. That was the most important thing at that particular time. No other buildings or anything else. And inside the plant, it held the chemicals in proper perspective. It was designed in. It also was designed in for another DAF unit to go in place, all for the future as well. And a lot of people don't realize that, and it's unfortunate. But that was part of the reason. And I think Susanna could even state this, that we were being pressured by Vancouver Island Health under this mandate to get this plant built. It was 10 years already too late. When they dropped the NTUs from 3 to 1, all of a sudden, all over Vancouver Island, they're starting to build water treatment plants because they were mandated they could not pass without it. That's it.
May I say something?
Your turn.
Ted, you're absolutely right. It was mandated. And by the way, the change in the NTUs happened in 2013. So many, many, many years we knew that anything over 1 was a problem. So what the issue is we did not rise and report, Ted. As was pointed out by Gary in our minutes, they were all done in camera. We never reported to the public. I raised that as a concern on multiple occasions. That's why the public doesn't trust and wants to know what happens, was they were not made aware, which we had a legal obligation to do. We shouldn't have even been having those discussions, most of them in camera in the first place, because they don't properly fit in camera. So that's an issue that the board, which Ted, you were a part of, I was a part of, as well as Bitten and Loxham and Jakes, and you shut the public out of any financial discussion related to the treatment plant. And of course, people were alarmed and concerned because it was a huge amount of money. And that is a lesson learned, that we should have not done that. We should have not had all those meetings in camera. And when we did, appropriately, we should have reported out to the public immediately. That did not happen, Ted, and you have to take responsibility. That has nothing to do with VHA mandating us to build the treatment plant.
May I interject with an answer to that,
Yes,
Chair?
yes.
Susanna, I have to agree with just about everything you've said there. The other thing is, this thing drug on for 10 years. Over 10 years that this plant should have been going forward and never did. That's a number of chairs and committees and boards long before me. The only reason that I came in was I wanted that water treatment plant to get built, but again, it was not my decision, it was a board decision. I'm trying to clarify that I had no way of turning around and making this my decision. It was a board decision. And everything that went out regarding that plant, its drawings, its structural integrity and everything else had to go and be passed by the Vancouver Island Health before it would fly. That takes time as well. So all I can say is we made mistakes. We certainly did. There's no doubt about it. But at least we have a water treatment plant and we can work on the rest.
Yes, and our water is so much better. I have to say, the quality of our water is definitely improved.
I agree.
I'd like to make some comments as well. Look, this is probably, one of the more, significant open items in the UBID history of UBID as to, what happened in the period when meetings were more often closed than open. And, it's easy to make assumptions that, nefarious things were going on. But I don't think that's a valid way to start, right? The place to start is, what do we know? And, within the scope of what we're trying to do here, what we're trying to understand is, why are we underfunded? Why do we have a deficit within our budget right now? And certainly, there's a lot of additional things we could add into scope about, for what reason did we, were we in camera, and why did it take until 2018 before a project started instead of 2010? Like, there's so much more digging we could do. But what we're faced with right now is, my goodness, we have a surprise in our audited financial statements that says we have a deficit and we're going to have to figure out how to solve it. And the question is, what happened? Not why did it happen, because why is probably a pretty difficult question to answer, right? But what is it that we see that did happen? What is it that we didn't see, or what is it that we saw that didn't happen? Like, in Gary's words, as he said, he has not seen discussions or documentation of how to fund contracts 1 and 2, which were the land clearing and the acquisition of the filter, right? So we didn't see that. So, you know, I want transparency. That's really like, I was quite strong in our cow meeting on that says our landowners need to know as much as can happen. But this isn't, you know, an assigning of blame. You know, that to me, I'm not interested in assigning blame. I'm interested in knowing, how did we get here, right? And how do we get out of here? And for the landowners to understand as much of that process as possible. So I'll stop there. I guess I'll say one last thing, right? Is that to go farther than Gary has gone will be very difficult, right? Because now we're starting to talk about searching email logs and you know, trying to interview people to say, what did you talk about 3 years ago? And will you remember? You know, it's going to be a very difficult thing to piece together, much more than what was in the official record, and tellingly, what wasn't in the official record. So that's my comments. I will, Eve, back to you to, you know, you started the discussion. I'd love to say, what else do you have to add to it?
Well, I think in my feeling is that we'll never really find out why or how we were underfunded. What we could do is put together a picture of what happened step by step, which Carol has already started on. But it's not going to be we're never going to find out who said what when, and even if we did, I'm sure there was nothing nefarious, just maybe not competent. And what will that do if we find that out? We can't do anything about it now.
Nor will it serve us.
It won't serve us because we can't do anything about it. It happened, and now we're in this situation. So what do we actually really want to do? I'm not sure, because the motion said a report summarizing the past events and activities which led to the underfunding, which is exactly what Carol and Mary and I were trying to do, and really good work done. And now I don't really hear that in Gary's proposal. So we need a new motion altogether, if that's what you guys want, or what exactly do we want? I'm kind of confused.
Well, I think that the motion that was seconded was that I have to look back over here again, that the interim administrator engage a consultant to prepare a report summarizing the past events and activities which led to the underfunding of the UBID water treatment plant, as indicated in the materials contained in the agenda package provided by the interim administrator and the auditor. Right, so we're now moving from committee in the original amended motion to a consultant preparing a report. And so, you know.
But if that's the motion, I don't know why we need to hire and pay somebody else. We could do that right now. We are doing that. We were doing that. We just need Gary and Janice and the auditor to provide us with the same information they would provide the independent guy. But if Gary thinks we need all that other stuff, which is good stuff, then yeah, I'm all for getting a consultant to do all of that stuff. That's what I'm asking. What do we want? Because this motion doesn't cover Gary's proposal.
Suzanne, I'm going to keep going in the order that we were in before. So I'm going to ask Ted if he has any comments that he would like to add on top of that. Or before you do, Ted, Eve, was there a question there that I'm ignoring that you would want Gary to answer?
Well, yeah, but no.
Okay, it was just an open item.
Yeah.
Okay, Ted?
Well, I think the idea of Gary, he's done some research. He's gone through a lot of the records, etc., regarding what we need to know. And as he said, his expertise, he would like to pass this on to another individual who has more expertise in the field that we're looking at. I think that's the way we can clean up a lot of loose ends and get a reasonable report made by a professional. And I think that's what's needed at this time to get this thing over the hump before this goes into the regional district. And we don't have much time left. I think that would be the direction to go, and it would probably clarify a lot of things that need to be said. And I like that proposal. I think it's more professional and it's more to the point of what people need to know and understand.
Okay,
That's
thank
it.
you. Susanna, I know you had something to say.
I do think we have all the information that we need to make to answer the question, how did we come to underfund the water treatment plant? We have that in the minutes. Gary, you already summarized that by going through the COW meetings. Mistakes made, not having put those things forward publicly in Rise and Report. I am fine with having a consultant draft a summary report of that, but I have to question, what is he going to offer us in terms of advice of next steps that we don't already know, which is we need to borrow the money. Obviously, that would be through municipal financing, not through RBC. We need to raise the taxes on landowners, or we don't have any other, like, if he can provide us with other avenues to make it right, I don't see how, though. I don't see, but so I support a professional report, but I guess I'm wondering, what is he going to give us that, Gary, you actually haven't already kind of summarized in your standing report today, as well as pointing out, yeah, we need to fund this. We need to find funding for the missing money, and it's going to come out of only three places.
Thank you. I would only add one thing, which is I'm presuming that we have funds within our budget to cover what will probably, in Gary's estimate, be between $900 and $1,200 of consulting. That's the $60 an hour times 15 to 20 hours, right? And I also trust and respect Gary's guidance and advice on this one, that if he feels that is necessary to do that, I'm willing to go with him on that. That, you know, he feels that will provide us the closure, the best closure that we're looking for. That's my opinion only, though. So going to ask if there's any more input on this, or whether we should vote on the motion as put forward. You know, if there are any other amendments that people want to make before we make a motion or have a vote. But I think we're getting to that point where we need to just decide, given that it's $900 to $1,200, although it's behind that $900 to $1,200 is a significant issue, as I said.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I wouldn't want to be quoted on that. I mean, in my initial discussions, you know, he thought maybe 10 to 20 hours work, something like that. It's hard to say, but I mean, I can provide him with the key pieces of information that I've come across, and I'm happy to provide, if you elect to still continue with the steering committee, I'm happy to provide that steering committee with the materials that I've flagged so that you can go through the books yourself. But I think definitely, in my professional opinion, I would certainly be wanting to have some sort of a report from a financial professional along the lines as I've talked about with the three principal components. And clearly, as part of his exercise, he's going to you know, piece together and connect the dots and find out what the gaps were and lessons learned and what needs to be considered. And I would definitely be looking for him to come back with some professional advice on some of those potential options that the auditor has suggested. And really, by the auditor putting them in the financial statements, it's kind of incumbent upon us now to take that up. Okay, he's made a recommendation. Additional funding should be obtained to better fund the UTP, the water treatment plant. this could be in the form of this, that, or the other thing. I think we definitely need some advice moving forward, for the benefit of the CVRD.
Thank you, Gary. Are we in a point where we want to vote on this motion?
Yep.
We need clarity on it, or everybody's clear on what it is?
Could you just read the motion again once?
And of course, my laptop or my iPad just shut down. That the interim administrator engage a resource to prepare a report summarizing the past events and activities which led to the underfunding of the UBID water treatment plant as indicated in the materials contained in the agenda package provided by the interim administrator and the auditor.
Thank you.
All in favor of this motion, say aye.
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 Okay, thank you. We're still on our motion, or our agenda item to ratify motions from our COW meeting. There was a COW meeting, or another motion, UBID Board 2021 Strategic Priorities / Special Work Items, proposed separate office / washroom / staff room facility at UBID Water Treatment Plant, that Trustee Goudreau be designated as the chair of the aforementioned select committee with the assistance of staff. So that motion, I would propose now that it is not necessary and it be tabled as opposed to postponed. Discussion of that topic. We've basically said we're engaging a consultant or a resource to prepare the report, and that we therefore have not created a committee because the motion was amended from committee to consultant. And so we can just table this motion.
Is this consultant going to just engage with us the one time after the final report has been submitted? Or are we going to get to hear his progress, or how is that going to go?
Gary, what would your thoughts be on
Mr. Chair, my thoughts would be, similar to, if I was in a municipality, I have my finance director prepare this report, present it to me, and I would present it to the finance subcommittee of the local government or something like that before it went to the full council. From my perspective, whether or not you wish to proceed, and still have some sort of a subcommittee, call it what you will, a select committee, to kind of stay on top of this. I'm comfortable to work with a group like that, but kick it over to me, and at least initially, let me work with my resource, have that resource talk to some key people, come back with a draft report, and I'm happy to present that to a subcommittee or a select committee to review before it comes back to the full board.
I think that's a good idea.
what do you think is a good idea, Eve?
That the committee stands with the people that we voted approved, and that this source, this consultant, through Gary or directly or both of them, would report to this committee, and then this committee would have input.
Okay, so the scope of the committee would be to review the report
Yeah, to review his work and maybe perhaps.
and make recommendations.
Yeah, and recommendations. Yeah.
And Mr. Chairman, so that there's transparency, I'm happy to, I've already picked out certain pieces of key information that I would want to give to my resource to assist in him investigating this. But I'm also happy to, send the documentation that I've reviewed back to the subcommittee so that they could review it themselves. But I think I'd like to set up a process where, we'll do a professional report in draft, and then we'll present it back to a subcommittee or whatever you want to call it for review and comment.
Okay, well, the reason why I like that, I just like that there will be landowner representation on this committee that are also fairly expert in Union Bay and the working. So I'd like that. I'd like that to stay if possible.
So that would say then that we need we would then need a motion to form a committee because we haven't had that yet.
No, we haven't.
So-
Yeah,
No, because we replaced
With
that
the-
motion with get
yeah.
a report. So motion to form a select advisory committee, which scope would be to review the report as presented by the financial advisor, the financial consultant, and make recommendations to the board. Does that sound right?
Yep, to work with the administrator and his resource to basically, the committee would be the group that I would principally be reporting to it, at least initially, before coming back to the full board.
Okay, so that's the motion. Second,
Second,
any further discussion on this? All in favor of said motion,
aye.
say aye.
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 And
Okay,
ne-
so next is to appoint committee members.
And chair.
A chair and a second trustee and one or more members of the public. So,
I nominate Eve to
Nominate-
be chair.
okay, any other nominations for chair? All in favor of Eve being chair of this committee, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Nomination for a second member of this committee, second trustee member of this committee.
I nominate Susanna. Who else can I nominate?
I accept the nomination.
Any
Thank
other
you.
nominations for this committee?
Ian, you've got too much on your plate, right?
I would decline a nomination. obviously. Okay, all in favor of Susanna being a trustee on this committee? Say aye.
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 Okay, and then I guess, Gary, we're in a rise and report situation here, are we not? That we had,
Rise and report. Well,
with
so
respect to the public members of this committee.
yes, but really there should be a motion.
Right.
To appoint
Yes,
these.
so motion, and we had our discussions in camera were regarding appointing public members to this committee. So the motion would be that the board appoints Carol Molstad and Mary Reynolds to serve as public members on this committee. Can I have a seconder of that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, actually, we should do them one at a time. Let's just say Carol Molstad as a public member of this committee. Because I think it makes it clearer to do it one at a time.
But we've
Okay,
already,
so,
We've already done that, but yes,
okay, so that's seconded, all in favor?
aye.
Say aye. A motion to appoint Mary Reynolds to be a public member of this committee. Can I have a second?
Second,
second.
All in favor?
aye.
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 Okay.
Okay, so I think we finally finished that agenda item, which is the ratification of, where am I? Ratification. Reports now. Gary, do we want to switch order at all to make sure Chief Ham,
Uh,
are we gonna, because I think he has a time limit, does he not?
yeah, we can ask him to be brief.
Would we like him to go first?
Yeah, he can go first, sure.
All right. Chief Ham, thank you for your contributions.
Oh, thank you. Am I doing my report? Is that what this is?
You're doing
Yeah,
your report.
Just a summary, Ian, is fine, thanks.
Okay, yeah. I'm sure you've all seen and read. It's kind of generic other than the you know, the calls and the little things that are happening, but we responded to 8 calls in March. We're continuing to maintain the COVID protocol. We're still training in small groups and whatnot, which we're allowed to do. So we're carrying that on because we don't want to get too far behind in the training. You know, the coastal fire, things are starting to pick up a little bit. Some of the island is already into the moderate. We're still in the green and the good, but it's coming. Recruit training is still ongoing. Of course, we're adhering to the protocols. We've had a member complete the FR3 training in Oyster River, which was pretty awesome. And he was pretty excited actually, because he texted me after he did his practical and he got 100%. And I don't think I've ever seen anybody get 100% on a practical, a medical practical like that. So, you know, well done for him. We had 5 members attend SPP WFF1, which is like a structural protection wildfire interface course that Oyster River offered us for free, actually. They were doing it for their members and they let us attend that. So we had 5 members attend, and the written portions of that are done. We just have to do the practicals in-house yet. But we do have the forms from the Office of the Fire Commissioner to complete that. There was some vehicle maintenance done in March. We had some leaking brake valves. We had to replace some batteries that went completely flat and wouldn't hold a charge. And a pump indicator, all fixed by well, the batteries we did in-house, we brought them in ourselves, but we tried a new facility in town called Eddie's Equipment, and he rolls out to the hall and provides service, which was actually excellent. I have to admit, it was being our first time, I was skeptical of it, and I was really waiting to get the bills to see what they would be like, but they were just completely reasonable. The service was awesome, so I'm very, very happy with that. And it's nice not to have to move equipment out of the bay to get a little bit of servicing. Sometimes you have to, but for this stuff, it was done in-house and it was awesome. I think the worst thing that we had happen was our breathing air compressor went down, and that was a fair bit of work, but it's up and running. It's kind of critical because not only does it serve our fire department, we provide air for Fanny Bay and Ships Point as well. They're breathing air, so that they don't have to go to Courtney to get air. So that was good. And the membership, I don't know if you heard in the news about Lawrence Burns. He had a fall, and I think he broke a femur or something, and it was quite serious, but he is home recovering now. He was, I don't know if you know Lawrence Burns, but he was one of the long time ago fire chiefs of Courtney.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's the serving chaplain for all of the fire departments in the Comox Valley. So we wish him well, and the department has sent him a get well card and whatnot, and hopefully he'll be back. But he's thinking he might pack it in, but we're waiting to hear on that. We're still having some rodent issues at the hall. We now have a couple of live traps in there, so we'll see if that'll help get them relocated. That was part of the problem with, yeah, I don't know where relocated to where, but that's somewhere that maybe they'll become food. Our occupational health and safety is ongoing. The hall inspections are continuing, and no reports of any incidents or accidents. Public relations, most of you know that we did the drive-through. It's not a March thing per se, but well, I guess it is. The Easter Bunny drive-by, and you know, that was well received again this year. It wasn't quite as an impact as it was the first time with the early stages of COVID, but it was still well received, and I was happy to see everybody. It was nice. And we are still actively recruiting for new members. And that's my report.
Thank you. Any questions for Chief Ham? Well, thank you, Ian. Thanks for the continued protection of everybody here.
You're welcome.
Just again, for managing people's time commitments, do we want to skip ahead to the item 7A and the fire department renewal fund disbursement bylaw, or do we want to stay with reports? Gary, you okay with us skipping ahead?
Yeah, I guess you can. I mean, it's really just a statutory requirement to pass this bylaw, given the decision has already been made. So it's really a routine kind of item.
So we don't really need Ian present for that if we,
No.
okay, great. And so I guess we should adapt Ian's report then with a motion. So motion to adopt the fire chief's report.
I'll move.
Second,
Second.
all in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you very much, Ian. So I guess we can then move back to the interim. Do we want to do yours or do we want to do Janice's? We're trying to respect people's time.
You can do Janice's, Mr.
Okay.
Chair.
All right, Janice, you're up.
I didn't actually have an official report. I just did the financial statement. Because
Right.
basically
They're
my
not in
report
here.
would say audit and conversion work. That was it.
Okay, so what do we need to know about the financial statements?
I don't know. Do you have any questions?
Where is the one that has the comparison to budget?
Last one.
There it is. So what's the big red number at the bottom? Can we understand that for a second here? So are we actually $145,000 ahead of budget or behind budget? It looks like we're ahead.
Mhm.
So, but that's largely because of parcel tax.
Yes.
Yeah, the time of
Okay.
year.
Yeah, getting it spread over.
Yeah.
So is there anything from your perspective, Janice, that's noteworthy that, says it's out of line with budget or as expected?
No, we will have an adjustment to wage expense once I do the year-end adjustments.
So that will increase wages or decrease wages?
It will pull wages out from that first pay period and put them in the correct year.
Into last year.
Yes.
And how large is that adjustment?
Oh, it's a whole pay period, so I actually have the adjustments here.
A quarter of what's here kind of thing?
I've actually got the adjustments. See, now you wouldn't have to listen to me think if I knew what your questions were. I'm just gonna add. About 26,000.
So that'll just add to the surplus.
Bottom line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So nothing in here that you saw that was an extraordinary expense or revenues being lower because of water consumption, any of those kinds of things?
No. The water treatment plant loan is finally a mortgage. The conversion has happened, so it's like, yay.
Okay,
And then it will be in turn converted to municipal finance authority.
Yeah, that's up to the CVRD. They gotta go through their process.
and we figured that that was going to be 1 to 2 years beyond the initial time when we placed the loan or the mortgage, and the mortgage dates back to when?
It just converted.
Just converted, and we put a 2-year term on it.
Yes.
Okay, so that will delay our conversion to municipal financing, because we thought 2 years from the time we placed that mortgage, right, or when we approved that mortgage.
And I know they have also, the RDs also talked about, there's only 2 times a year you can apply for something to go through MFA.
Right. Which means the earliest we can go to MFA now is like January of 2023 or February of 2023. So it's not like, yes, there's a cost associated with that, right? We knew, like, to me, this has been about, when did we place or when did we approve that mortgage? Back in September?
November, October.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're delayed by approximately 6 months.
Yeah.
Do we know what the source of that delay was and whether, you know, how much of it was the bank's process?
No, it was the signatories on the account. We signed off on the docs, sent them in, realized there was one original signatory, which was Ted. So all the signatories had to be changed. Everybody had to go sign. Yeah, it was a long process. And then RBC, it took them a while to complete the documentation.
Is there any opportunity for us to push them for some sort of early termination privilege as a result of this delay?
Mhm.
That would allow us to convert this to, you know, for the purpose of converting to MFA. Like I'm kind of going, it feels like not good. You know, it feels like, you know, we have had 6 months or so past that we perhaps could have moved to a lower interest rate faster.
Right. I mean, it would be worth Gary
Let's-
writing a letter.
Worth a try.
Yeah.
Yeah, asking for that provision
Yeah.
within the mortgage to say we can convert at no penalty to MFA when available, or, you know, beyond such and such a date.
Yeah, definitely.
Do we need a motion for that? Because I feel quite strongly about that as well.
Does it need a motion, Gary? You're on mute.
Yes, it should, please.
Okay. Motion to request the administrator communicate or correspond with the Royal Bank with respect to a provision for conversion to Municipal Finance Authority.
Second,
All in favor of said motion? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Anything else? Great. Okay, thank you, Janice. Okay, back to our interim administrator for his report.
Well, Mr. Chairman, my report's fairly lengthy. I don't intend, I don't propose to go through it and read it. I'll just hit the principal highlights. I mean, basically, what I try to do each report is encapsulate where we're at with conversion, as well as any items that have previously been brought to the board that I may be working on. I'll just start with the Southern Railway of Vancouver Island outstanding invoices. We've talked about this before. When I brought my last report, there was some discussion about possibly paying the bills, paying the outstanding invoices off next year, and then basically, unilaterally kind of canceling the two agreements. I had a brief chat with the lawyer about that, and we could do that. But, his cautionary is that the rail company could then require UBID to remove at its expense the works from the lands and require that the property be restored back to its original condition. I don't know whether they do that or not. Obviously, if they did require that, that's not in our best interest. We wouldn't want to do that. So we'd probably end up in front of this Canadian Transportation Agency to argue our case at a lot more expense than what the invoices are. So I'm continuing to recommend that as these two agreements remain in effect, that the outstanding fees, we continue to bookmark them for potential payment in 22, but that consideration be given at that time to making a further approach to the railway as to whether it'd be prepared to drop the fees or to negotiate a lower rate. They weren't prepared to do that this year. They were happy to take the payment for 2021 and 2020, but they weren't prepared to and to bookmark them for the outstanding ones for future payment. But they weren't amenable to dropping the fees entirely or negotiating a lower rate. So I just reaffirm my recommendation that we continue to bookmark these for potential payment. I'll bring it to the attention of the CVRD, and maybe the CVRD could argue the case better than we have in terms of dropping the fees entirely or negotiating a lower rate. So that's the Southern Railway. If there's no questions, I'll just hit the high points on the conversion process. And those of you that are on the conversion working group, you'll be hearing about a few of these things next week at the meeting. On the HR side, there was an informational open house on March 31st, hosted by the CVRD for all unionized staff at UBID. The CVRD is continuing to offer employment to UBID staff post-conversion, and they're looking at presenting offer letters of employment to unionized staff at UBID in late April or early May. And they've been pestering Janice for background information in regards to certifications and things like that. So they're working on that.
They have it.
Yep. Communications, there's proposed to be a virtual open house to be held on May 18th between 4:30 and 5:30, hosted by the CVRD. Virtual open house for UBID residents, Q&As. And Mr. Chair, they're going to ask you and I to have a meeting, participate in a meeting with them the week before to do a little bit of I guess, rehearsal, for the open house. They're preparing a boatload of informational materials, which they're going to ask us to review. Legislative services, I mentioned that there's over 100 boxes of records at the Aquatic Center at the CRT. 71 boxes we went through an initial sort last week. There's about 21 boxes of miscellaneous administration and operation documents that, as well as a couple of filing cabinets that still need to be gone through. So obviously that has, that is certainly in progress. On the water side today, and this is why Dan is unable to join the meeting, there was a comprehensive tour conducted by the CVRD of the water distribution and supply system, and took a fairly substantial part of the day, I think. And this was attended by their senior water operators, and Dan and Sonia hosted them. They toured the plant, Langley Lake distribution system. One other thing to note, this may come up next week. I know that CVRD is thinking of, after conversion, switching to a quarterly water billing system. They're looking at the merits of doing that. Haven't made a final decision, I don't think, but that seems to be where it may be going at some point in time after conversion. On the fire side, CVRD have been provided with the payroll documentation, employment information for the existing UBID fire staff, and they will be reaching out in regards to discussions with certainly Chief Ham in regards to continuation of employment with the CVRD, and much like the offer letters that are being prepared for the CUPE staff, they're going to go through the same process for fire. And communications with the ministry, attached to my report are the 2 orders in council. I've sent them out previously to you that have now been enacted by the provincial cabinet. The first one converts the services of UBID to the CVRD and transfers all the rights, assets, liabilities, and obligations to the CVRD effective July 1st. The second order in council is the one that amends our letters patent to change the required number of trustees from 5 to 3. And that's effective the date of the, it's effective April 22nd. On the strategic priority special projects, B parcels, I've actually done a little bit of further work on that. Dan has gone through that list of 108. He's come up with 3 or 4 different categories of the parcels. I've had a chat with Peter Johnson, and Peter's been reviewing our policy and a bylaw that goes back to 2005 that talks about assessments and courts of revision and handling of parcel charges. So I'm going to be putting some advice and information from him and myself back on the COW meeting in May in regards to B parcels and what we should do with that and potential next steps. The subdivision bylaw, of course, we just had that discussion. I'm recommending that you do raise this issue next week and communicate the motions and some of the concerns that you have moving forward. And then what I would expect should be asked of the CVRD is that they come back with a response. What are they prepared to do about this? In terms of adopting their own bylaw or tweaking any bylaws or whatever. And basically, I wouldn't say put the ball in their court, but ask them to respond. They sat in and listened to your articulated concerns. Water treatment plant, the separate office washroom building, you've passed a motion to let's start going down the road of a modular portable office building as opposed to site build. And I've actually consulted with the CVRD, got their RFQ, request for quotations template, and I've received some OH&S, WorkSafe, occupational health and safety feedback from CVRD in terms of some of the specs that should be put in the RFQ. So we should be in a position, I would think, let's get through the annual general meeting, but we should be in a position to proceed with an RFQ in early May. So, Mr. Chairman, that's my report. If there's any questions.
You're on mute. You're on mute.
Questions for Gary?
Gary?
Yes.
Last question regarding construction of a permanent structure, the water treatment plant for the staff. It would be nice if that could get started during the good weather times. If that's possible to work towards at least getting the tenders started. Once they come to a design and so on and a drawing that can be approved to go forward.
Yeah, I understood, and we're pretty well going ahead on the basis of Dan McGill's sort of sketch, some of his specs, but I've got some input and feedback from the OH&S people at CVRD. So the next exercise really, Ted, is to put together a request for quotation. It doesn't have to be a formal tender, but basically much like, somewhat like a fire apparatus. Okay, what are the mandatory specifications? And what are the desired specifications? And here's the size, and here are the components that we need to have in, and cast the net more formally and wider in terms of potential suppliers. And I've got a wider list of potential suppliers who would be in a position, hopefully, to respond. It's a very competitive market out there right now, and a lot of these
Very.
guys are backed up. But yeah, as I say, I think we're in a position to proceed with an RFQ within a couple of weeks.
That would be good because the way it goes with building construction and so on now, they're pretty doggone busy and hard to get a hold of.
Yeah.
Because everybody's working.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Eve, any questions?
No.
Susanna, I think you said no, didn't you? Yeah.
Good, no.
That's my only
Yeah.
comment is that, I see the B parcel item tying into the funding of the, or the underfunding component of our discussion around the water treatment plant.
Yeah.
And that, if we can find ways of bringing B parcels into it, it will lessen the load to be covered by all. Okay, so guess we didn't make a motion to accept Janice's report, my bad. So motion first to accept the assistant administrators or deputy administrators report and financial statements.
So
Second.
moved.
Yeah, so moved. Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion to accept the interim administrators report as written.
Second.
Okay,
I'll
all in
move it.
favor,
Aye.
say aye. Okay. And now I guess we are on to the Public Works report. Dan's not with us, so let's just have a quick review of it ourselves. Where is that? Must be in advance of the Ulysses.
Pretty straightforward, Mr. Chairman. I understand the treatment plant has been behaving quite well. Janice, have you heard anything? It's been operating quite well.
That's been good.
Yeah, and Dan went through a bit of a firestorm of leaks there a couple of weeks ago, but I think it's been fairly quiet the past couple of weeks, Janice?
This week, it's been good.
This week, yeah.
We got any indication, does anybody have any knowledge of where volume's going? Has it started to head up yet? Are we hitting the summer season yet?
No, Dan would have to be here, Mr. Chairman, to explain that.
Okay. All right, any questions that we haven't answered, asked on this report? Motion to adopt the Public Works report?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we should be through reports. So we are now on to new business. And the first item on the new business is some correspondence from a landowner with respect to a leak allowance appeal. And I will turn this over to Gary, really, to speak to it. Gary, I guess I can summarize, right? Basically what the appeal would say is that I had a leak and it started in the last billing period, which was November, December, and continued unnoticed until a Public Works employee notified them on January 19th that they had a leak. And they're saying, since our policy was rescinded as of January 1st, does that still apply, or are they able to have a leak allowance? They've asked for a leak allowance continuing from that leak which occurred in 2020 through to January 19th. I can't recall the amount of the leak. Does anybody have that number on the top of their head? Just trying to scroll down to it.
Well, Mr. Chairman, Lindsay has basically summarized the leak affected 2 billing cycles, the November, December, and the January, February bills. The leak allowance program was discontinued in 21. The Goulds are asking if the leak allowance can be applied to the November, December, and the January, February bills. These bills are significant. The leak allowance credits, Janice may be able to speak to this better than me, but the leak allowance credits calculated by staff are calculated at $2,713.08 for November, December, and $1,695 for January, February. Janice, any
I'm just
comment?
looking it up now.
So I guess the decision before us is, do we want to grant an exception or an allowance in this case because it occurred prior to the date at which we rescinded it? And I guess that consider their request in whole or in part, right? In part being the November, December portion only, or would we also consider the January, Feb portion, given that it was the same leak that extended across 2 billing periods?
So I can tell you the bill for January, February was $2,000. And the base rate is 108. So it's very significant.
What was
What-
the, what was the first, that was for, what was the November, December leak cost?
$2,713.84.
So that's when they got the first bill for it. And then, do you know what the bill for the second one was?
That was the second one I just told you. So yeah, this one, the November, December,
Yeah,
it was $2,875.05.
and they didn't fix it right away?
Yeah, they
waited-
did. Well, they didn't know about it until in January. When I noticed the bills, I got a hold of Danny to go look. And it was wet out, so they didn't notice it.
So I personally feel we have an obligation to honor the leak allowance for the months that the policy were still in effect, which would be November, December, but they're out of luck for January, February.
Agreed. I think,
End of story.
I agree with that one myself.
Ted, I see you wanting to comment.
Yeah, it's an awful lot of money. That's really terrible that happened, and fortunately they never noticed it. I guess it was a leak where it wasn't affecting the water pressure in the house or whatever. But anyhow, I have to agree. The first 2 months up to the end of December, yeah, credit them that. And it's unfortunate, but I think the January, February, they're going to have to pay. It's sorry, it couldn't knock it all off, but that's basically my feeling towards it. Same as Susanna and Eves.
Okay. So it sounds to me like there is a motion to be made here. A motion to grant the Goulds a leak allowance in the amount of $2,713.84, covering the period from November 1st to December 31st, which was still under a time in which leak allowances were permitted.
I so move.
Second.
Any further
Second.
discussion of this item? Okay, all in favor of this motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, back to the next piece of correspondence, which is a fun one. Correspondence regarding the harvesting of wild plants along the trail behind the Union Bay Community Center. So I think all of us received an email from a landowner, I believe it was a landowner, who asked us to post a sign prohibiting the harvesting of plants. This letter was also sent to the administration. I have since also corresponded with Daniel Arbor about this. As my first reaction was, yeah, I understand the issue, but it is not within the scope of our responsibilities as a board, as it's not water, fire, or street lighting. And so I asked Daniel Arbor if it was in the purview of CBRD, and which he replied, no, it is not, because the land in question is private land. And that trail behind the community center is Union Bay Estates land until such time as it is granted to CBRD as part of the parks component of their development. So, you know, essentially, there's not much we can do about this one in my mind. What I have done so far is there was an item posted on Union Bay Facebook bulletin board. It was really, really nicely done. I forget exactly who posted it, but it was saying, please leave the trilliums in the ground. And the trilliums, you know, take 5 to 14 years to flower to start with, and 2 to 7 years to flower again after they're picked.
True.
Apparently, what was observed in this case was a number of people had left bags of plants already harvested out of the ground, and there was trilliums and lilies and a couple of other wildflowers in there. And the person, they walked further into the trail and came across a group of 4 or 5 people who had spades in hand and were still digging and were unaware that they were violating any sort of, if indeed they are violating anything, right? But they were still in there digging, right? So what I have done is I attached a comment on the Facebook page that said the trustees had received a communication about this group activity of removing wildflowers, and that I made it a personal comment that said essentially that my preference would be that we leave beauty in place for all of our neighbors to enjoy as well. And so it's along those lines that I made that comment, but it can't be official because it has nothing to do with us. I would propose that what we do in this is, if correspondence came to us as a board, it's usually on the chair to write back on things, and I will communicate our sympathy for the issue, but that it isn't within the purview, and direct them towards the owners of the land or perhaps the Ministry of Environment for further involvement. Any other thoughts on this?
I
Ted?
think Union Bay Estates should be notified, because they probably would agree that it should be left, not be dug up, being it's on their private land. Whoever's doing this probably never got permission. So maybe that's the way to go, is to inform the landowner that this activity is going on, and maybe they should look into it.
I'm wondering if that's within our response. I guess it's a good neighbor's thing to do.
That's correct. It's a good neighbor thing to do.
Other thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree. And certainly letting the owner know, whoever the landowner would be of private land that is being harvested, is a good neighbor thing to do. It's just bad practice to be collecting property off of any private land or crown land. Wouldn't matter.
I agree.
Certainly, it's not obvious that that is private land back in there. Like, there's no posting that says private property or anything, but other than the chain across the top of the trail.
To me, it's irrelevant whether it's private or public. It's like, you just don't dig stuff up and then put it into your own yard.
Yeah. So
I agree.
Sounds like 2 actions. I will write back. And we want to notify Union Bay Estates or forward the communications to Union Bay Estates, or do we want to do that, or do we want to direct the landowner to do that? That's a simpler one, is just to engage the landowner and say, right to Union Bay Estates, it's their land.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, I'll respond with that. I'll handle the course.
Yeah, we did the research to determine, you know, who is responsible for that land, and it turns out to, yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
they have the evidence too, because they took pictures or whatever. So, yeah.
Good.
Okay, so that is the correspondence item. Bylaws. Item 7. So we have a bylaw to process here, the Fire Department Reserve Fund Disbursement Bylaw 288, a bylaw to authorize the allocation of $65,000 for the purchase of firefighter turnout gear. We'll need to do 2 readings of this bylaw. Assume it's at the bottom here. Scrolling. Okay, so the bylaw is at the bottom of our package, second, sort of last 4 pages, I think, are the bylaws. So let me give it its first reading. A bylaw to authorize the disbursement of monies in the Fire Department Renewal and Replacement Reserve Fund, whereas there is an unappropriated balance in the Fire Department Restricted Renewal Reserve Fund of $1,456,608 as of March 31st, 2021. And whereas it is deemed desirable to expend a portion of the monies imposed under bylaw number 64, Renewal Reserve Fund, for the replacement of 18 sets of firefighter turnout gear, therefore the trustees of the Union Bay Improvement District duly enact as follows. The sum of $65,000 is hereby appropriated from the Fire Rescue Reserve Fund to be expended towards the purchase of the 18 sets of firefighter turnout gear. The expenditure to be carried out by the monies hereby appropriated shall be more particularly specified and authorized by resolution of the trustees. Should any of the above amounts remain unexpended after the expenditures hereby authorized have been made, any unexpended balance shall be returned to the credit of the said reserve fund. This bylaw may be cited as the 2021 Fire Department Renewal Reserve Fund Disbursement Bylaw number 288. So that's the bylaw. Can I have a motion? Gary, what's my motion?
Basically, to give the necessary readings to the bylaw in question.
Yeah, it's motion that to accept the first this bylaw in its first reading. Is that what I'm doing?
Yep.
Okay. Motion to accept this bylaw's first reading as read.
So moved.
All right, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And
Okay, so
then a second motion to basically reconsider and
debate, yeah.
No need to debate.
So the second, well, we'll find that out, won't we? So the second reading of this bylaw then is a bylaw to authorize the disbursement of monies, bylaw number 288, 2021 Fire Department Renewal Reserve Fund Disbursement Bylaw. A bylaw to authorize the disbursement of monies in the Fire Department Renewal and Reserve Replacement Fund, whereas there is an unappropriated balance in the Fire Department Restricted Renewal Reserve Fund of $1,456,608 as of March 31st, 2021. And whereas it is deemed desirable to expend a portion of the monies imposed under bylaw number 64, Renewal Reserve Fund, for the replacement of 18 sets of firefighter turnout gear, therefore the trustees of Union Bay Improvement District duly enact as follows. The sum of $65,000 is hereby appropriated from the Fire Rescue Renewal Reserve Fund to be expended towards the purchase of the 18 sets of firefighter turnout gear. The expenditure to be carried out by the monies hereby appropriated shall be more particularly specified and authorized by resolution of the trustees. Should any of the above amounts remain unexpended after the expenditures hereby authorized have been made, any unexpended balance shall be returned to the credit of said reserve fund. This bylaw may be cited as the 2021 Fire Department Renewal Reserve Fund Disbursement Bylaw number 288. Okay, so that motion is on, or that bylaw is on the floor and to be reconsidered and accepted. So can I have a second of that motion?
Second.
Any discussion and debate about this bylaw? Is there any changes, any things that anybody wants to do with this?
It's good.
Okay, so all in favor of passing this bylaw? Say aye.
Aye.
All right, we are through that bylaw. So the second bylaw that is here for us to debate is amending bylaw number 289, amending bylaw number 263, the meeting procedure bylaw. A bylaw to amend bylaw number 263 being the meeting procedure regulation bylaw. The trustees of the Union Bay Improvement District enact as follows. 1, that the Union Bay Improvement District's bylaw number 263, which was passed by the trustees on the 15th day of June 2016, is hereby amended by due to provincially mandated COVID-19 regulations restricting formal in-person meetings outside the workplace, the 2021 annual general meeting will be conducted virtually via Zoom. 2, this bylaw may be cited as bylaw number 289, amending bylaw number 263, meeting procedures bylaw. So that's first reading motion to accept this bylaw.
Motion to accept.
Second,
Second.
all in favor of first reading?
Aye.
Okay, second reading of bylaw number 289, amending bylaw number 263, meeting procedure bylaw. A bylaw to amend bylaw number 263 being the meeting procedures regulation bylaw. The trustees of the Union Bay Improvement District enact as follows. That the Union Bay Improvement District's bylaw number 263, which was passed by the trustees on the 15th day of June 2016, is hereby amended by adding the following section 10A under attendance of public at meetings. A, due to provincially mandated COVID-19 regulations restricting formal in-person meetings outside the workplace, the 2021 annual general meeting will be conducted virtually via Zoom. 2, this bylaw may be cited as bylaw number 289, amending bylaw number 263, meeting procedures. So motion to accept this bylaw, to enact this bylaw.
So moved.
Second, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Mr. Chairman, I just might add that this is a requirement from the ministry. Generally they encourage AGMs to be conducted in person. But the requirement, and I did confirm this with Catherine actually about, look, would we be permitted to have the AGM conducted, in an in-person forum? But given the current restrictions as they stand right now, no, we're not. So technically there's a requirement that our procedure bylaw be amended to provide for a virtual AGM. Not by any way desired, but really there's no way around it at this point in time, given the current restrictions.
Thank you for that clarification, Gary. Okay, so next section is unfinished business, which we continue to have updates from Gary on the conversion process and on the strategic priorities. He's addressed a lot of this in his report. Gary, is there anything further on these items that you want to bring
Not
forward?
really, Mr. Chairman, no.
Okay.
Under either 8A or 8B, no.
Do trustees have any further questions about either of those items that they would like to direct towards Gary? Okay, so that brings us basically to the close of our business. And before we close the meeting, I would like to open the floor to our landowners who are present on the call to ask if there are any questions. I saw Mary's mute button go off. So Mary, do you have a question?
I can't understand why you only rely on physical documents rather than digital.
I think you probably have two microphones on, Mary, so it's getting a real echo, but I think the question I heard was, I can't understand why we're only relying on physical documents rather than digital. And do I presume that this is with respect to the committee discussion we were having?
Yes.
Okay, so Gary, do you have some thoughts on this to start with?
The only comment I would make is, I did not do an exhaustive check of all of the electronic folders for in-camera minutes and committee of the whole and regular board minutes. I relied principally on the binders, which appear to be quite comprehensive in terms of minutes being placed in there with background material that was considered at each meeting. However, I did go back though and search in camera minutes electronically to see whether there was any gaps in terms of, oh, there's an electronic in-camera meeting that isn't in the binder, and I couldn't find any gaps of that nature. So I did go back to the electronic folders for meeting minutes, but I have not gone back to the water treatment plant folder with all the consultants' reports and change orders and all of that material in there. No, I have not done that.
My background is in the IT industry. While I'm not the technical person, I do have some experience with the searching of unstructured information, which is generally what an electronic filing system and an email system consists of. And essentially, in order to do it in any sort of effective form, you need to have installed some software which would allow for the same types of function that search engines give, like Google and those sorts of things, to be able to really kind of go, I want to, comb through the email of all, these specific people with respect to this subject or these search words. As far as I'm aware, we don't have that software at Union Bay, but I could be corrected on that one.
But you could look at in your own email search and you'll come up. I mean, everything has a search function.
It does, and I do find it personally frustrating, but yeah, in terms of the way that works. And I guess the other part of this too is how much effort can we allocate to this file on the basis of all of the other files that we have open with respect to conversion and strategic priorities.
Okay, can I explain my point of view? Why I'm the way I am about this is because for the last 4 years, we have been told that the administrator was too busy to answer questions, couldn't do any FOIs, couldn't answer correspondence. Now we have somebody in there that's a professional. Oh no, oh no. And we're told that everybody's too busy, and the files are somewhere else, and we're never going to know what happened because everybody's too busy. And I find that so unacceptable. Union Bay is going to be gone soon, and it should end on full transparency about what transpired specifically in the last 4 years, because we were told that we were guests at meetings. We didn't have a right to be there. That meetings were adjourned and resumed in a secret location. Things went on that we didn't know about. And to go by the minutes and things like that, you're depending on the accuracy of the previous administrator, what they wanted to record. And everything that happened did not end up in those minutes. Sorry, that's the end of my rant. That's why I'm.
Appreciate the submission, Mary. Like that's a legitimate
Mhm.
opinion from your perspective. Like, I don't want to belittle it. Like, I understand your perspective.
Thank you.
And so, and we'll take it as input into the work we're doing, right? I would like to sort of respond to Mary in one way here, right? Is that I've always said that from my perspective, transparency is one of the most important things we can provide as a board. And there's a balance in things at times that says also that, one of the best things, one of the things we've agreed as a community to do is to convert to CVRD. And that has a timeline on it that might cause compromise in some of the other things we can do. But I totally understand the desire for transparency. Susanna, would
Yeah,
you
I
like to
just-
contribute?
Yeah, if I would like to add, I would like to see out of this process that we just voted to proceed on. One suggestion might be that we publish publicly the in-camera COW meetings regarding the financing of the water treatment plant, so that those things which should have been published earlier, that will all come, that might be one of the outcomes of the report, is that better late than never,
We'll have to consider that as a board, because we've been down that path before in terms of legal advice with respect to releasing those minutes or just professional advice around releasing those minutes. So I think the report that we're going to get will probably bring a good summary of information together, but I see Gary wants to speak as well.
Well, that would be my objective, Mr. Chairman, and I want to give Mary some degree of assurance that yeah, I did check the electronic document folders for in-camera minutes with the objective of, are there any electronic minutes that aren't in the paper binders? I couldn't find any. I also did look through the water treatment file, water treatment plant main folder, and there's various categories and subfolders, right? With contract documents and things like that. I mean, I can't profess to have done an exhaustive look at all of that material, but in my review of it, I couldn't find anything that would assist me in connecting the dots in terms of the decision-making process on the financial piece, right? There's lots of stuff in there of a technical nature, consultants reports and construction change orders and stuff like that. But I in my preliminary examination, I couldn't find anything that would have assisted me in terms of, okay, what kind of financial information and briefings were given to the board as this project progressed?
Gary, is it
I
not?
did do a search, and I used the search function too.
Let's not reopen any debates here or discussions around this. This is the landowner's question section, so let's just leave it at that.
Ian, respectfully, I would like to clarify something that in-camera committee of the whole meeting minutes says right in the Freedom of Information Act, is that they are to be released publicly when it is appropriate to do that.
Let's put it on a board agenda. Let's not debate it here. This is the landowner question section.
So I would like to put that as a item for debate.
Okay, let's
For
get
the
that
next
on an
meeting.
agenda for the next
Yeah.
COW meeting.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions from our landowners?
Hello, is anybody else going to ask a question or can I ask another one?
You may ask another one.
Regarding the MMCD, what Eve said, I'm the one that sent her the email, and she summed it up perfectly. Because to quote Zoe, the MMCD standards and specifications as a guiding document and typically a baseline reference for the quality and expectations we expect, blah, blah, blah. So it's not, she even says it's not in their bylaws. So I forwarded that to you anyways, because it seems like you guys are just going back and forth with the MMCD and nothing's happening. And yet I got right from the engineering department the answer to the question.
I don't think we're going back and forth, Mary. I think where we're at right now is that we need to consult with CVRD as to where we're at and how we move forward with respect to the provisions we were looking for in the 2016 bylaw. We're going to try to cover that off at the next working advisory committee and see where we go from there.
If you check the email I sent you, I asked specific questions regarding the existing bylaw and what the CVRD has and how that affects what Union Bay Estates does. I was very specific about my questions, so you'll see the answer that I was given.
Okay, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Mary, I'm not sure there's anybody else that is going to ask questions. Do you have others that you'd like to ask?
Yes, but you know, we could be here all evening. I suppose I would specifically like to correct what Ted said when he said about being under the gun to get this water treatment plant built. The board in 2016 purchased that land up by the highway. And Ted at the time said it was a swamp and it would cost $500,000.
Yeah. I don't want to enter into debates with the board. It really is about questions, Mary, and I don't think it's going to be productive if we engage in a debate about what was happening and what was said at that time. I'm sorry to cut it off, but I'd really like to keep this more as questions.
Yeah, I can understand that. It's just that the impression that Ted left was not accurate. So I'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you've suffered enough. I'm going to let you go.
All right, thank you. All right, so that the final points of the agenda talk about upcoming meetings, and there is a special board meeting to be held next week. It will be conducted via Zoom, and that special board meeting is for the board to be presented with the financial statements in advance of the AGM. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, yesterday Janice and I had a meeting with the auditor. He overviewed the draft financial statements and the draft auditor's report. And the plan is he's going to give me the final documents tomorrow, and I will be sending those out Monday with the agenda for the April 22nd special board meeting. I'll send the Zoom link. It'll be open to the public, but the primary purpose is really single fold for the auditor to give you a comprehensive briefing on the financial statements and the auditor's report, and give you an opportunity to ask any questions. And then at the AGM on the 29th, of course, as you know, the auditor will also be in attendance and to overview the statements as well and entertain questions from the public. So we're on track to do that.
Yeah. And then the second item on the notice of upcoming board meetings is indeed the annual general meeting, which will be held on Thursday, April the 29th at 7 p.m. and also will be conducted via Zoom. All right, so that is the agenda. A motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? Say aye.
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 Thank you, Ian.
Long meeting,
Thank
but
you.
productive
Thanks,
again.
Thank you, Gary.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Janice.
Gary. Thank you, Janice.